Jacob Jaffa. Hello, Jacob.
Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, we saw there the news that, in a way, the whole world has been trapped in a false drama since Sunday, because we'd assumed that it was this almost horrific situation where 5 men were trapped somewhere down in the depths with their oxygen running out, the countdown to death. But in fact, it looks as if they descended on the Sunday. They started going down at 8 o'clock. At 9:45, we lost contact with them. And it looks as if that was the moment when it was only 1,600 feet from the Titanic that the hull of their tiny submersible called the Titan just imploded, and they would have died instantly. As I say, you don't celebrate something like that, but I think for the families, that will be a source of some solace, that their loved ones did not suffer a long, protracted, agonising death down there in the deep.
Well, as you say, there was all this speculation about how long did we have to try and rescue the 5 passengers, what was the window of oxygen. Unfortunately, it appears that none of that mattered in the end, and as you mentioned, within a couple of hours of going down, something's happened, whether it be a design fault or a crack or anything like that. Something has allowed the pressure to escape that hull, meaning that it's just imploded. And as you mentioned, we don't like talking about it, and it's a horrible thing to have to think about. But if we do find small mercies in this, it's that it would have been over before the people on board even knew what was happening.
Absolutely. Now, on board was Stockton Rush. He was the chief executive of OceanGate, the company that provided these excursions down to see Titanic, yours for just 200,000 quid, so it was a sort of rich person's only opportunity. But people have the adventurous spirit and they do this. But what I wanted to ask you about OceanGate is, for me, the great mystery, the big question that needs answering, is this vessel submerged at 8 a.m. on Sunday, was last heard of at 9:45 a.m. It's supposed to regularly send messages back up to the north, to the surface, to prove it's still okay. It disappeared at 9:45. OceanGate didn't raise the alarm for another 8 hours. What on earth is that all about?
Yeah, there have been lots of questions about OceanGate, how safe the vessel was, what the procedures were like, the fact that the mothership which launched it didn't have a recovery vehicle on board, the fact that there was no navigation system, a relatively basic communication system. It was guided by text messages from people on the ship above, and also sent automatic pings every 15 minutes just to basically say that it was still in operation. And as you say, after about an hour and 45 minutes, the last of those pings happened. But the alarm wasn't raised until the time when the sub was meant to be re-emerging from the water. And so it appears that what's happened is people have lost contact with this sub, but waited until it was meant to come back to actually say, oh, there might be something wrong here. And members of the families have been, in fact, I believe Stockton Rush's wife, no, sorry, it was Hamish Harding's cousin, has been very critical of the company in that, and saying they waited far too long.
So what they had clearly assumed was, OK, they've lost contact. You know, the communication system isn't working, but they proceeded on the basis that the boat was, or the sub was, all right. And they waited until such time as they would have expected it to reappear. And when it didn't, they finally raised the alarm. Well, they're going to face a lot of questions about that. Now, you've written about the British victim of this terrible tragedy, Hamish Harding. One of the outrages, I think, he went to Cambridge. His college was having a party this week based on submarines. It was a submarine ball, submarine-themed ball. They were called upon to call this off out of respect, because at the time we didn't know where Hamish was or whether he was still alive, and they didn't. They carried on with that, which I think is a disgrace. But tell us a bit about Hamish Harding, a self-made billionaire, an adventurer, clearly.
Yeah, he is very experienced in this sort of stuff, and something we've, there's been a lot of criticism of the people on board. on social media, and quite horrible stuff, actually. A lot of it saying, that they're just sort of silly rich people and they're just going off on a jaunt, and it's actually far more dangerous than they realised. And they've ended up, obviously tragically, they've died. But all the people on board, other than the teenage son of one of the passengers, were seasoned adventure tourists, extreme tourists, adventurers, whatever you want to call them. Hamish Harding himself has 3 Guinness World Records, 2 of them to do with deep sea exploration. He's been to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. These people knew what they were doing, and it seems that something on that craft has let them down quite catastrophically.
Yeah, particularly the French diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who's been down to see the Titanic, I think, more than any other person alive. So he would have known what he was doing. And I assume, would be across sort of safety standards as well. But what I wanted to ask you, Jacob, was the Pakistani, British-based Pakistani billionaire, Shahzada Dawood. He took his son, his 19-year-old son, Suleman Dawood, down with him. And we're learning that, in fact, Suleman, it's being reported that he only did it to keep his dad happy and was actually terrified of getting onto this craft. So there's a kind of sad story there.
Yes, absolutely. His aunt, Shahzada's older sister, Asma, has spoken to the press and said that Suleman was terrified, that he didn't really want to go down in that craft. But his dad was so passionate about the Titanic and about this sort of adventuring that he wanted to kind of please his father, to make him proud, and to bond with him over this shared experience. And so we don't know how much that contributed to him going down, but his aunt is saying that. And it's all the more tragic that, of course, we lost contact with this sub, and it seems that they all died across Father's Day. So that's just, it's kind of too terrible for words.
Too sad for words, absolutely. What do you think the future of Titanic tourism is, going down there just to sightsee? One would have thought not a very long future.
Well, I've been asked this question quite a lot in the past few days, and I've spoken on it quite a lot. And it seems to me that the only direction that this can move in is excessively tightening regulation. So I don't think this will stop. And I think actually the destination for all this sort of extreme tourism to space, to the deep sea, is more commercialism and becoming more publicly available and cheaper. But with that will come, especially with tragedies like this, very strict regulation. And you'll see a lot, far fewer companies like OceanGate, where they're relatively small companies, not huge budgets, not using military grade equipment, where you will see, if anything like this happens again, and this sort of tourism continues, it will need to be high budget, high safety standard, with large and regulated companies doing it.
I presume, last question really, Jacob, I presume investigations are going on right now into the safety standards, just how safe was Titan, just how safe are these trips down to those kind of depths. I presume that's happening right now, and that will determine how future missions to the Titanic are carried out.
Absolutely. There are going to be extensive investigations into this. I think at this stage, the mission is recovering as much debris and as much evidence as possible. And if we can recover a large part of that craft, then we can have a kind of full investigation into what exactly went wrong, try and pinpoint it. But there's been a lot of criticism around the safety standards on this mission. Even James Cameron, the director of Titanic, has come out and said, he said the company didn't go and get certified because they knew they wouldn't pass, and that he wouldn't have got on the sub, and it wasn't a good idea. And there's been echoes of that throughout the discourse around this. So there will be a full investigation, I'm sure, and it will be probably quite a bad day for OceanGate once the data is in.
Yeah, it's not looking good for OceanGate. As I say, one question that's going to be asked extremely pressingly is why they waited 8 hours to raise the alarm. But you came up with, I hadn't realised that may be the basis of why they took so long, because they were assuming that maybe just the communications were out and the boat would reappear, but of course it never did. Jacob, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Jacob Jaffa, journalist on The Sun, who's been covering this story all